This is the third installment in our Distinct series. In the first week, we looked at how Jesus is distinct because he, like anyone else who's ever lived, was God. Then we talked about how you and I are made distinct too because the God who made us values creativity and uniqueness. Today, we're going to talk about what we can actually do with our personal distinctness. We're reading from a person named Paul. Paul wrote most of the New Testament of the Bible, and his story, his personal story, can be read in the book of Acts in the New Testament of the Bible. And when we read about Paul, we see that he used to be very anti-Christian, but he had a dramatic encounter with Jesus that completely changed his life. And then he had this unique mission. God called Paul to spread the message of Jesus beyond the Jewish communities where it had started. And then he helped those faith communities know how to live out their faith. He wrote to one church that he had helped establish in the city of Corinth, and he told them about how they should use their spiritual giftedness, the way God had uniquely gifted them to live out their faith and to benefit one another and to be a church. And in chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians, starting in verse 4, this is what we read. Now, there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and varieties of service, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but the same God who empowers them all in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. And then in verse 11, it says this, all these are empowered by one and the same Spirit who apportions to each one individually as he wills. See, Paul teaches here that everyone's unique, and that your uniqueness comes from God, and that everyone is equally important. So why did God make us unique? Why didn't God just create each of us with the same giftedness, with the same skills and experiences? Why did God bother to make us each unique? We're going to look at the writing of another follower of Jesus. This is Peter, who was one of Jesus' closest followers, and he was an important figure in the early church. And he wrote a letter that we call 1 Peter. And in chapter 4, verse 10, this is what he says. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. A steward is a simple way of saying like someone who's responsible, who's taking ownership of something. And so Peter says here that we're supposed to be responsible people of God's varied grace. See, Peter and Paul had very different backgrounds, temperaments, experiences, and areas of expertise. And in fact, their differences even resulted in a huge conflict and a disagreement between the two of them. But Paul and Peter were both used by God in significant ways to spread the good news about Jesus all over the world. And it wasn't despite their distinctions, despite their differences, despite their different gifts, but it was actually because of them. Jesus was able to use them in unique ways because they were unique figures. But they both agreed that we all, despite our differences, also have a unique role to play. See, we can all serve in distinct ways.